Hello and welcome to Fellowship in Essential Oils. My name is Adam and I'm joined again by the beautiful Liz. How are you today, Liz?
I'm lovely, thank you, Adam. It's so nice to see you again after your break.
Yes, we had a bit of a break, so forgive us for not being around last week, but we're going to catch you up with a couple of extra juicy episodes in the next few days, so stay tuned. But we're really, really excited because we're diving into an essential oil that I find kind of plays second fiddle to poor old peppermint. That's another member of the mint family. Today we're exploring spearmint.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody gets really excited about peppermint. In fact, when I was doing a bit of keyword research, I even put it into Google and said, well, what am I looking at here? And Google just went, let me tell you everything there is to know about peppermint. I was like, no, don't tell me what to think, because they are really quite different, aren't they?
They are. And one thing I've been discovering about the mint family is, we kind of, if you ask most people to name mints, they can name peppermint and spearmint, but there are quite a lot of different mint and different mint essential oils. Others I work with are like Japanese peppermint and bergamot mint, which we'll explore maybe later on. But the mint family is a big family, but spearmint definitely can stand on its own for being a special oil, for sure.
Agreed. I actually collect mint plants. But so I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But just to mention, you talked about Japanese mint. Some people call it corn mint because it's the same oil. But yes, spearmint is a standalone oil, and I think a lot more delicate than peppermint oil. I have to say, I find peppermint really antagonizing. I don't like it at all. I'm not very good with things like coffee and stimulants, and so peppermint is too strong for me. It really overwhelms me, but I really love spearmint.
And we would really put that down probably to the menthol content in the two, because I know peppermint is normally about 35% menthol in the oils that I use, whereas spearmint drops down to about 1%. And that menthol's that part that really gives that cool, refreshing awakening. For, when we inhale it, kind of gives us a bit of alertness. When we put it on our skin, we get that cooling kind of relieving effect in that way. So that would be one of the big differences that would separate the two out, wouldn't it?
In fact, functionally they're completely different. So as you quite rightly say, actually peppermint can be anything up to about 50% menthol, but then on top of that up to about 30% menthone. But that hardly appears, as you quite rightly say, in spearmint. Spearmint's predominantly a very strange molecule called carvone. And carvone is a reason why I say it's a strange molecule is because it also makes up the majority of caraway. And if you think of how caraway smells and how spearmint smells, really different.
There is.
But it's the carvone that gives them both the smell.
I can kind of see a little note of similarity now that you mentioned that. Yeah.
So they're isomers of each other. So if you imagine a very priestess thing to say, but if you imagine the hexagon that makes the molecule, on one the hydrogen bond goes off that way, on the other it goes that way, and just that single little structure difference makes complete difference in terms of smell. So and I think it's usually spearmint will be between 60 to 70% carvone, so not just a little bit chemistry difference, complete radical difference. And so on the surface level we can use it really like similarly in terms of digestion and nausea and those things that you would use peppermint for. It doesn't have the same cooling nature as peppermint, because you quite rightly say that's executed through the menthol. It is a bit cooling, but it's not very cooling. Peppermint is stimulating. For the most part, carvone's properties are sedative. So completely different. In actual fact, I never noticed this before, but when I looked into Sarandon Young to check my chemistry out, he calls it mentha cardiaca. So to do with the heart. And actually, where that Latin name came from, I don't know, but I can't use peppermint because it makes my heart race. Spearmint doesn't. So I wonder if that's where that came from.
Yeah, really interesting. And interesting that you talked about digestive. Before we started recording, I was telling my tales of Mercury retrograde challenging me and having issues with my laptop screen breaking and leaving a credit card on a plane and all these different challenges. But I also had another challenge this week. I got food poisoning.
Oh my goodness, what a week!
It's been an epic week. I'm glad I made it through. But the interesting thing was, there are lots of good oils that are great for digestion, but spearmint was one that I really leaned into because what I like about it is that it does have that gentle nature about it. And yeah, there might be some oils that might be a bit more powerful with the digestive system, but when you're feeling queasy, you don't want to kind of go with the hard ones.
No.
And spearmint was a really nice one just to, mix with a bit of coconut oil, pop on the belly, and it just really helped to kind of give a bit of soothing as I kind of got myself back into balance.
Oh, poor you.
It was all in the name of the podcast and study.
Of course, it was just experimenting. I was making myself hideously ill just in the name of research. I agree entirely with what you say about spearmint, and as we talk, I will talk about children quite a lot, upset children quite a lot. But one of the reasons that peppermint would be contraindicated for children is that menthol interacts with a receptor, can't remember exactly which one, but it slows respiration. And so the same reason as like 1,8-cineol interacts with the slows respiration as well. So you wouldn't use that on little children. We don't have that same interaction with carbone. And so much safer to use on children. So if you've got a child who's got tummy bug or emotionally upset belly, we'll talk about that quite a lot, then it's really lovely. But also, it's not as potent as eucalyptus or as peppermint for unblocking the nose, but it will a bit. And peppermint, of course, is irritant to the mucous membrane. So little snotty noses, that can really make it worse to have that. So again, spearmint would be better for kids there.
So overall, I guess spearmint on a physical level kind of has a bit more of a subtle approach, but sometimes we need a more subtle approach, whether it be, for those that are feeling fragile, the elderly, the children, or just, when you got food poisoning, you don't want to go with a big gun. So really think of spearmint as its place of being a bit more subtle in its way to support you.
I think emotionally and psychologically subtle, but carvone is a really tough, heavy-hitting molecule. It is a potent, strong medicine. It just doesn't. It doesn't have that kind of punch that. Like I talk about rosemary having and sweet basil. If you have sweet basil in the car, you can't smell anything else. It's really pervasive and it's bossy. It's not as bossy. Yeah. Yeah,
it's interesting what you're saying there about that kind of gentleness. I often refer to peppermint as day mint because it's really good for waking you up during the day, whereas spearmint I nickname night mint. So I like to actually put, if I feel I need a little bit of alertness, but I don't want to be pinging and wide awake at 10 o'clock at night, spearmint as the sun starts to set can be really nice for that kind of focus as well.
Yeah, I can remember when I went to Egypt in my 20s, and I've got, as we can see, the whitest skin in the history of the world, which burns really easily. And my mum made me a cream with patchouli, spikenard, and spearmint. And it was so cooling and so relaxing, just at the end of the day, just to be able to put it on. Spearmint and spikenard smell beautiful together. Spearmint and yarrow smell beautiful together. And they both have that lovely, soothing nature to them.
Now, are there any other ways that you'd use spearmint on a physical level?
Well, actually, it depends on... sometimes that bridge between physical and emotional is hardly there, isn't it? But it's well researched for being like a hepatic support. And of course, we have like the liver, of course, comes into gastroprotective, digestive, all of that, doesn't it? But today I was like, I don't think I even want to use it. And I was sat down, I thought it's the perfect thing, actually. I've got so many things to do, so much admin to do, so many disparate little jobs to do. And it's that kind of juggling that leads to migraines and stuff like that. And part of that comes from the fact that your liver just goes, I just can't process all of these things at once. And so that lovely soothing nature of just going, cool down, cool down. And I can feel the migraine going off, you know, as it settles the whole digestion system. And that's not just the headache, that's the nausea that was with it and all sorts.
Yeah. It almost feels as though for spearmint, you know, there's a statement that, you know, sometimes a gentle nudge is more powerful than a shove.
Yeah.
And spearmint does kind of work in that nudging, coercive, gentle way, but just as powerful as some of our other oils, just in a different approach to the body.
Yeah. And I call it the shapeshifter. Because, and going back to what I said and making myself feel sick again with that now. What I was going back to what I was saying about collecting mints. Do you grow any mints in the garden?
No, I must admit, now that I'm here in the Middle East, my 3 little pot plants that are gathered around me are the only plants that I have for kilometers.
So let me tell you a few things about, so from a wart cunning point of view of learning from the spirits of the plant rather than from the textbooks. So Minthe was a nymph, and we talk about these nymphs in British shamanism a lot. The Melissa priestesses were often nymphs. They were unhatched bees and priestesses who were both bee and woman, but also plant and woman. And Minthe is one of these plants. So the myth goes that Minthe lay in the bed with Pluto. So she got into bed with Hades, and Persephone, who is the Kore, she is the Melissa goddess. Persephone went, oh, no, you don't. And she turned her into the mint plant, which was on the edge of the river Cocytus, or Cocytus, I think Cocytus is probably right, which is one of the rivers that surrounds the Hades, as in the land of Hades, the underworld, and it was the river of wailing. And when you read through all the different references, where was it? Where do we see it mentioned? It's always prophetesses that talk about this. I prophesize here, I prophesize there. They're always there. So we have this connection with this wailing. And actually, the river Cocytus turns up again in Dante's Inferno, and it talks about the different layers of the levels of hell that they go through. And the river Cocytus is about betrayal. So there's 4 different sorts of people that go in. I won't go into them because they're all different regions, but always it pertains to betrayal. And when we talk about mint in the garden, there's sort of several things to understand. The first is that it can reproduce on its own. So yes, Persephone, I wouldn't want that round my bloke either. So I can understand why you did that. So if you have a mint plant and you lay some leaves down, some branches down, peg them down, where the branches are, they will make roots. So they can really do either a lot of damage very quickly because they invade everything very quickly, or you can make a big bush quickly. So it's a strong plant. But also they have the ability to knock out other species. So if you put a spearmint plant amongst other mint plants, they will all hybridize and become spearmint plants. So extremely good at bringing like things round to her way of thinking. And of course, remember what we said about the shape-shifting molecule of carbone as well. So this is really a thing. So I can remember my mom always talking as a specific about spearmint, and she uses it on me and my sister, that when you've got a little girl that's really upset, and you know that kind of can't catch a breath, kind of like only little kids can do, you know, that crying where they just can't catch the breath. That's a specific for spearmint oil. And we've got this lamentation of the waters, but particularly for little girls who feel their friends have betrayed them. So, and that seems like a small thing, but if you have had teenage girls, you'll know that's not a small thing. And in this world of internet bullying, where, you know, it's very easy to really isolate somebody and push somebody out to make comments about the way they look, the way they are, just to, I mean, I have to say, my son just comes home and he just says, I hate girls, Mom, I hate them. They're just horrible to each other and they're horrible to us. And one day somebody's friends, the next they're out. And those kind of tasks for challenges for a teenage girl are absolutely spearmint medicine. And so we can push that further out, because I have to be careful now, because it might be one of the moms watching it who this particularly relates to. But if you've got one of those children who reacts negatively and starts to starve herself or hurt herself or any of those things, and we are properly going into shadow, into the underworld, then that is spearmint work to do.
Yeah. Wow. And I think, you know, you're talking about, you know, people feeling, you know, rejected or not accepted and that type of thing. Yes, I can definitely see it happening for young girls and teenage girls. But I think in this day and age, there is, you know, whether we attribute it to the internet or whether we attribute it to the pandemic or whether we attribute it to just the way the world's going, there is that feeling of almost that friends are disposable.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And that we can often feel rejected. And in this case, spearmint can be really great. Another way that I talk about in my book of using it is it actually can help to, I guess, like Mentha, the nymph who was rather confident in herself and will slowly take over. It can be a really good one when we find ourselves in situations where, you know, wherever we're in somewhere new, maybe you're starting a new job or you're going to a new event where you don't know anyone. And, you know, it doesn't matter how confident you normally are, you can feel really awkward doing basic things like getting something out of your bag. And spearmint's a really nice one to kind of enshroud yourself in, just to kind of let you feel your own space and get rid of that kind of embarrassment and awkwardness that you might have in an unusual situation. Or if you tend to be a bit of an awkward or socially anxious person, I find spearmint can be really beneficial in that way as well.
Yeah, and I think that this idea of like wearing the oil, you know, for these little girls who walk into a space where there frankly are a load of little bitches, you know, there's nobody worse than a 14-year-old girl. We all know that. But this kind of, you smell a bit different, and that fascination, and remember how you know, spearmint knows how to turn people, you know. The queen of the underworld was frightened of her. She was no small thing, you know. It's very persuasive being able to shapeshift and fit in. I mean, I know that it's shallow, but there is that element of, well, let me talk to you about the way that you want me to talk to you. Let me look the way that you want me to look. And there's almost that magical ability about it. But I talk about this in my book that's coming out in September. One of my favorite things about it was I contemplated this sort of Persephone Minto relationship for a long time, backwards and forwards. And of course, we think about all the ways that Hades changed his name through time, but all through different disciplines. So you've got he's Hades, but he was Roman Pluto. Greco-Roman is Serapis. We go over to Egyptian. The Egyptian Lord of the Underworld is Osiris. And so the Osiris is the Egyptian Hades, Aedes aegypti. Aedes aegypti is what? Do you know?
No, I don't. You've lost me on that one.
Mosquito.
Ah,
it's the mosquito, and so it's the biggest purveyor of malaria, and mint is anti-mosquito. So you can imagine how like she's cursed him round this like river, and they're trying to walk across, and he's like, well, the mosquitoes are in there, and she's like, you're not going anywhere nearer. It's like magical, lovely like spell that she got.
Because the interesting play between, you know, I know the kind of one of the overriding rules of the gods of Greece and Rome is that they couldn't reverse a spell or magic that was done by another god, but they could twist it. So although Persephone, you know, in the version I've I'm familiar with, she stamped on her to make her, she flattened her into that flat-leaved plant.
That's right.
But then Pluto or Hades didn't want anyone to forget how beautiful she was. So he was the one who actually blessed her with the aroma.
Oh, there we go.
And gave her, so whenever we stand on mint, she releases that and we remember her beauty, just like he remembered the beauty as well. So it's really interesting how all these kind of twist in together, for sure. Yeah.
There is one more thing I wanted to say about the physical medicine that I completely forgot.
Yeah.
So there's lots of scientific evidence into spearmint tea for polycystic ovarian syndrome, and how these poor ladies get really hairy. I mean, that in itself must be like, God, they must endure such awful comments of people. But the tea is well researched for helping this hirsuteness, this hairiness, reducing it down. But it comes to a rapid standstill because they weren't able to prove it on a large term basis. So they prove it over and over again that it works for people, but not like you can't just prescribe it to people that it can guarantee that it'll work. And so we can't actually say that the spearmint essential oil will do the same thing. But I think if it were me, I'd be tempted to be using it. And for that, I would say be drinking spearmint tea, and I'd be making a moisturizer with it and just putting it on and see if that reverses the hairiness. I don't know. It's just a suggestion.
And I guess that leads to a question that people might be wondering about. You know, there's obviously a lot of different teas that we can drink that also they're available as an essential oil. Now, what we're getting in a tea is going to be very different to an essential oil. There will be some crossover of chemistry, but just because we can drink it as a tea, you know, doesn't mean, you know, that type of thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, wholeheartedly. Yeah. So like when you distill something, obviously the process is that the molecules, the oily molecules, are lifted by the steam and then cooled. But there's lots of watery molecules left behind. There's lots of like flavonoids left behind that are big, so they can't get on. So, like for example, flavonoids are in tea, but some are in essential oils, but not many. But so yeah, the crossover is not like a direct parallel, but of course there are clues often.
Now, we talked a lot about the Greeks and the Romans, and another thing I know that the Greeks and the Romans, where they used spearmint, it is believed that those that were studying metaphysics or the occult or the kind of mystical things would actually keep spearmint around them, or even wear wreaths of spearmint to help them to get that greater understanding of the world, and to dive deeper into the mysteries, and I guess into the darker mysteries of Hades and Pluto and so on. So that kind of links back to what I was talking about before, and why I really like it as night mint is, whereas peppermint will help you with things such as, okay, what am I doing with my life, or what do I need to do today? Spearmint helps us to kind of pay attention to things that are a bit more subtle. Now, I often am reminded when I think of spearmint of, you know, in the past, I used to believe a lot more in unicorns and dragons and fairies. And I often question, well, are they still around? But maybe we've just got too many lights on and too many notifications and sounds beeping and buzzing that we don't notice those things that are happening around us. So what I love spearmint for is I actually encourage people who want to go on a bit of a deep journey with spearmint to do a technology detox. And as the sun sets, let's get as many lights off and as much technology gone, diffusing spearmint around your home, and just notice what you notice. There are so many things that tell us, you know, Netflix tells us what we need to watch, and Spotify tells us what we need to listen to, and, you know, different websites will tell us what we need to buy, and we don't listen to what we want. And so I'm not saying turn the lights off, diffuse spearmint and a unicorn will gallop into your lounge room, but we may just start to notice a little bit more about what's happening within us and what's happening around us as well. And remember that when it comes to spirituality and our guides and all that, if we are part of the universe, what we're feeling inside is often signals from outside as well. And we don't have to wait for an external force to appear and guide us. So I really like spearmint for that kind of that heightened awareness of the other realms. Whereas I would, you know, peppermint would be more like, right, what am I doing in my daily day-to-day life? And I need to get clear with which way I'm heading.
That's really fascinating thinking. You're talking about I cannot comment on unicorns. I know nothing about unicorns except that my sister feels that she may be one, and she poos glitter everywhere, she reckons. But but in my wart cunning group, we have ever such a lot of people who are working with dragon energy. I was really surprised how many there were. And of course, I see plant spirits all the time, so, and bee spirits, so we know that they are there. And one of the first things that you learn when you train to be a Melissa priestess is to engage your brain in a different level so that you can learn to draw more back from your dreams. So what we always talk about is trying to remember and observe what you have sensed through the day. So 5 beautiful things I saw, 5 beautiful things I heard, 5 beautiful things I touched, 5 beautiful things I tasted, 5 beautiful things I smelt. And the weird thing is, for weeks I'd go and I'd think, I only smelt the dog's farts. I can't think of anything else that I felt today. And I realised that actually that part of my filter of consciousness just wasn't working, which was really strange for somebody who's an aromatherapist. I just had no recollection of it whatsoever. Taste I can always do. Sight I can always do. Hear, that's quite difficult as well. It's hard to think of 5 beautiful things, or and they don't need to be beautiful, actually, like as in lovely. Sometimes they can be evocative, moving, they're upsetting, but what actually moved you? And then the other thing is, what did I behold? As in, what did I bear witness to? And it's very interesting how you go through, as you say, you can go through a whole day and not actually witness anything because you've been looking at IT, And for example, day before yesterday, I had to move some hives over, and I'd got the bees out, and I saw 4 bees hatch out of their comb, and I've never watched that before. And I thought, well, that's an extraordinary experience that probably I wouldn't have even noticed had I not been concentrating as to what I was watching for. And it really heightens intuition to behave in that manner.
So maybe something I'd like to really encourage people to try maybe for the next week as they work with Spearmint a little bit more, of being a bit more aware and a bit more present of what's happening around them. The average person these days believe that they are exposed to about the same amount of information as 150 newspapers.
Oh
and I often
gosh.
think about my parents, if they wanted the news, they might buy the paper in the morning or on the weekend and read that, and then they'd watch the 6 o'clock news at night, and that was it. Whereas we know now that we are seeing what's happening with people we know and people we don't know all around the world, and we have access to that constantly around the time. Now, every single thing that is happening around us, whether it be the whir of the fridge behind you or the air conditioning or your phone beeping or that, your brain is actually noticing. But it has to then filter out what is the most important. So no wonder we're all feeling overwhelmed, because our poor little brain, although we're not aware of all these different things, is actually monitoring that, noticing that, and then trying to pick out and go, oh, you need to know about that. Oh, you need to know about that. So Spearmint might just help us drop in a little bit more to that peace and that quiet of not being so overwhelmed and noticing things that maybe on that deeper, more spiritual level. And the fact that you're watching this or listening to this podcast, I'm guessing you're probably slightly interested in that, and just allowing some of that noise to slip away to hear what you actually want to hear. So give that a shot, and we'd love to know in the comments how you find that after working with Spearmint to allow you to facilitate that.
Genuinely, I found it one of the most transformative things I've ever done, to really practice doing that. Because also, and this is something that Vanessa Jean always talks about, you really develop a sense of gratitude about what's going on around you, that you've really feel blessed that you've witnessed things happening rather than just, I am on the treadmill each day, because that is a real thing, isn't it, in today's life? You can really feel like there's no sparkle, there's no magic. It's only because you're not noticing.
Yes, exactly. Yep. It's totally up to our brain, and our brain will keep noticing things that we already believe. So if you're in a belief system, then you're going to keep on going down that track. So Spearmint does have that ability to, awaken a deeper appreciation, a deeper magic for the world, for
Definitely.
sure. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about astrology. So I would say Spearmint would be a Pluto planet. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
That's normally where you place it? Yeah.
Yes. Although not too close to Pluto, because he's not very happy with the whole thing.
We'll get trouble.
Yeah, I would say that. But also Jupiter, because of the hepatic nature of it. The digestive system is hepatic. These feelings of frustration and anger with the kids, those are very much Jupiterian things, and this search for higher consciousness, learning, spirituality, religion, all of that is Jupiter as well, isn't it? So I would say also Jupiter.
I should say those that are listening to this just as this episode comes out as well, Pluto did go into retrograde on the 1st of May. And so, working with Pluto oils can be a really great time. This can be a time when it's a great time of, Pluto also has a bit of a volcanic energy about it. Very detoxifying and very transformational. It brings things up. And so what you may be finding at this point in time is it's a great time for detoxing physically, but it's also a great time for going, where in my life am I not being who I truly am destined to be? Am I maybe doing things? Am I, things like, am I going to the gym just to get compliments rather than actually caring for myself? Am I spending time with people that don't serve me? And am I being inauthentic or fake in different ways? And how can I get rid of that? And this is where any type of corruption, we may start to notice things where there's people be cheating or misleading and that type of thing. That can all kind of bubble up at this time. And Spearmint will help you to kind of, to digest that with ease, to breathe through that with ease, to not let it give you a headache, and to release that and go, well, what am I truly here to do? So really lean into Spearmint throughout this time, or whenever Pluto's in retrograde. And it could always be interesting diving into workout, and you can do it on a simple Google search of what is my Pluto sign, and to find out what is your core driver, because Pluto is very much about your core motivation of what you want in that way as well. So Spearmint, Pluto, I think they're really nicely matched together.
Interesting. That was very, very enlightening. Thank you.
My pleasure. Now, chakra. What chakra would you place Spearmint at?
I can feel it there on my throat chakra. I suppose, logically, it would have to be here too, I think, and solar plexus. But I can feel it mostly in my throat, in my voice. And so, when you're talking about authentic, what are you saying? How are you speaking to people? I can see how that. And of course, we talk about the little girl and the shape-shifting. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say? I can say that.
Yeah, interesting. I do find that a lot of people do attribute a lot of the mint oils to the throat chakra. And I've always found that quite interesting. I know I've heard it referred to as the oil of confident speech and helping us to speak a bit more confidently, that type of thing. And I always wonder whether we're used to just that minty taste in our mouth that makes us think about that. Because I've always found that Spearmint is very much a third eye chakra one for that higher awareness as well. But I guess, the thought happens here before it comes out. So,
but also the fact that it's eased my headache so quickly as well, that's the pineal gland, as well. You can feel it acting there, definitely.
Yeah. So Spearmint, I think, although plays second fiddle and maybe stands in the shadows of the big, bold Peppermint, hopefully today we've kind of convinced everyone that, she is a standalone oil and has her own special magic as well. Is there anything else that you feel we haven't touched on with Spearmint before we let everyone go for this week?
So I'm just having a look, actually. Yeah, so just the only other thing I would say is that one of the other reasons you can't use peppermint is if you're on blood thinning medications. So if you've got like a platelet disorder, like me, so I'm a thrombophiliac, I have to have a blood thinning medication sometimes, so then I can't use it. But also if you're on like a warfarin, or if you have like a platelet disorder where your blood doesn't clot, again, don't use peppermint, use spearmint. Awesome. Spearmint's amazing. And we pretty much were in alignment with our astrology and our chakras this week, which is always glorious. I know, it's nice, isn't it, when that happens? It is. Now, our favourite thing to do is to find out, what are we going to dive into next week? And I chose Spearmint, so it's your turn to choose. Well, while I'm shuffling, Do you want to do your shameless promotion of what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so if you enjoy the talk about astrology, myself and Vanessa Jean, who have written the book Gifts of Essential Oils, which you may be able to see in my background behind me, we're teaching a 7-month course which dives into getting to know your intimate astrology. So everyone knows their sun sign, but they don't necessarily know their Mercury sign, which kind of dictates the conscious thought and how we communicate, and all the way through, like I talked about, our Pluto sign. So I show you how to find them and then what oils to actually work with, which would align with them as well. So that's available at the moment. We'll put the link in the descriptions as well. It did start a couple of weeks ago. The group that's joined us is absolutely amazing, but the replays are all available, and we've got some latecomers coming in and they're going to be able to catch up. So if you want to be part of that, don't miss out. Definitely join the links.
Sounds amazing. When you're ready, say stop.
Stop.
I've forgotten to take the old cards out.
So we have to go the second
we're
choice.
We're safe. Ylang. Ooh, it's going to get saucy. So next week, ylang.
Excellent.
So I just wanted to do a shameless plug to say, those of you who are interested, as one of my readers messaged me and said, did you know your book's ready for pre-order on Amazon? I was like, I did not. So if you want to get the new book that's due out in September, it's there. Meeting the Melissa is ready on Amazon if you want it.
So that's Amazon, just the local Amazon around the world, wherever people may be listening?
Around the world, yep. So,
Beautiful.
yeah, exciting day. So it doesn't go live till the 29th of September. But, yeah, it's an extraordinarily strange book. But I think people will really like it, yeah.
So there's your homework for this week. Go pre-order Liz's book. Make sure you grab your spearmint out and dive in a little bit deeper and let her mysteries be unveiled to you. We will see you on next week's show when we explore Ylang Ylang. Take care.
Lovely to see you. Bye-bye-bye.